Context, a limited series from Student Affairs Now, the online learning community for higher education and student affairs. I'm your host, Heather Shea. We're recording this episode at 5:36 p.m. on Thursday, May 1st. And as always, things may have changed by the time you listen. This is our final episode in the series, at least for now, and I think it arrives at a pivotal and urgent moment for higher education. Over the past few months, we've been documenting the dramatic and at times deeply troubling developments in the early days of Donald Trump's second term. So let me just give a quick recap. Since January, the administration has launched an aggressive agenda, slashing research funding, dismantling the Department of Education, eliminating DEI programs, targeting international students, cracking down on campus protests, and trying to reverse student loan relief. The result is a higher ed landscape defined by political pressure, legal uncertainty, and financial precarity. So throughout this series, we have covered the partisan takeovers of boards, threats to academic freedom, the impact of intimidation on our undocumented, trans, first-gen, Black, Muslim, and other marginalized students. But we have also highlighted forms of resistance from student protests and faculty organizing to legal pushback and coalition building. I'm going to take a second and pause. It is the end of the semester. It's actually the last week, finals week here on my campus, commencement's this weekend. And I'm feeling this like familiar shift into summer mode, and we kind of collectively take a breath. And yet, higher ed family, we struggle in these moments of transition. Keith and I were talking earlier this morning, and he reminded me from our student development theory class at Colorado State, Dave McElfresh said that Dave back. He said that growth doesn't happen in the stages itself. It happens in that transition period between the stages. So today, as we enter these summer months, I think we need to ask ourselves collectively what kind of higher education system is emerging and how do we respond? So I have two returning guests here to help unpack that question. Welcome back, Dr. Crystal Garcia.
Hey, thank you for having me back.
Dr. Garcia is an expert in minoritized college students' experiences in campus environments and an associate professor at the University of Nebraska-Lincoln. And also with us is Dr. OiYan Poon.
Hello, glad to be back. Love the shout out to Mac.
Yes, Dave Mack, co-director of the College Admissions Futures Collaborative and consultant in higher education equity to Illinois Governor J.B. Pritzker's education team. So excited that you both are here. So let me get into a little bit of the recap. As I mentioned in the beginning, we are marking the first 100 days of President Trump's second term. This is always a traditional milestone that offers kind of a glimpse at any administration's priorities and governing style. So far, and we'll post some of these articles in the show notes, it's broken all the records. It's been a whirlwind of executive orders, agency shakeups, and legislative proposals that have signaled a dramatic shift in the federal government's relationship with our colleges and universities. We've seen calls to eliminate oversight while exerting political control, moves to undercut DEI and student protections, and escalating pressure on institutions to align with conservative agendas or face the consequences. And the headlines this week, which I'll mention, but we're going to focus more on the 100 days today, kind of bear this out, right? Harvard is responding to political pressure with promised reforms. A sweeping student aid overhaul is advancing in Congress, and competing ideological visions shaping federal policy are part of this broader pattern. And as we've said multiple times, these are not isolated incidents. They are part of a coordinated effort to remake higher education as we know it. So today, as we close out the series, we're taking stock, not just of what happens, but what it all means. Who is being centered? Who's being sidelined? What stories are dominating the narrative and which ones have been erased? And most importantly, how do we respond? So let's get into it. Crystal, given what I've just shared, where should we begin? as we discuss these first 100 days of colleges and universities in the field of student affairs under Donald Trump.
I mean, it's so much, right? Even as I was glancing through the articles, Heather, that you shared in preparation of this episode, I was just thinking, first 100 days, more like first 100 years, it feels like in some ways. For me, as a career educator, my heart is always around students and how they're experiencing this moment and what that looks like for them. In our history of higher ed class yesterday, we were unpacking just, a handful of the headlines that are more recent and some that, were published a little bit earlier on in the semester, including PEN America's release of the banned words list, for example. That massive list of words that are being flagged, banned right within federal spaces, that grants are being flagged for now, and funds rescinded, grants canceled, et cetera, around those. And students were baffled. I mean, and these are higher ed students, first of all, let me note, these are students that are studying colleges and universities, and they were taken aback by all that was happening, because I think big picture, they're keeping up with the news, but there's so many other things that are happening outside of higher ed that to just focus on all the things that have been happening within it, it's overwhelming. And so, I think about, for example, recently, Mohsen Madawi was released.
Right.
We know, though, that released but not cleared of, continued scrutiny. What will that path forward look like, legally speaking, for him? Other students, Rumeysa Ozturk, Mahmoud Khalil, have yet to be released. And we also know that some students had their visas reinstated, but not all students had visas reinstated. And the scrutiny and the uncertainty around that just continues. And so that's a lot for me to think about in terms of international students and the real ramifications that they're facing. And I think that for me, it's like a micro version of what we're seeing at a big social level across the country, in targeting particular groups that are very vulnerable, that don't have as many protections as others, and don't have, unfortunately, the advocacy and numbers that maybe other groups do. So, for example, international students in this scope, I think about trans students on the national scope, all of the laws, all of the legislation that is coming through, targeting those individuals, realizing that these are perhaps easier targets for them to start with. And likewise, at the institutional level, we're seeing attacks on one institution seemingly at a time, but these institutions are being chosen very strategically. These student groups are being chosen very strategically. And it's important for us to understand that a win for any of these attacks is a loss for all of us in a big way. And I wrote this down. Sorry, I'm going to read it word for word because I thought that it was so impactful. I don't know if you all tuned into the 100-day ABC interview that Trump completed.
I didn't watch it, but I think we should post it in the show notes so folks can watch. Yeah,
absolutely.
And thank you for watching it for us, Crystal.
Well,
tell us what happened, please.
So much happened, but something caught me. Like I literally had to pause and say, I need to remember this point. I was listening to this clip on a podcast, actually, on recapping the interview, and I was like, I need to remember this and get it whenever I get home, because I think it's so important. And it felt like a Passover moment. But Trump was talking about the law firms, right, that settled up with him, that he attacked. And, the interviewer said, is it just that they're defending causes that you don't agree with, and that you're just targeting them for that reason, and kind of pushed on that. But Trump replied and said, they paid hundreds of millions of dollars because they felt, I guess, they probably felt like they did something wrong. And he continued on.
Huh?
These are the most powerful firms in the world, and they just signed whatever I put in front of them. I've never seen anything like it. I'm actually surprised myself in a certain way, but they obviously felt they probably did something wrong. I guess that's why they signed. And yeah, there's so much to unpack from that. But all that I could think of is, I mean, it's admitting, right? It's admitting I go at, or institutions, people with whatever I think will possibly stick. And I'm kind of taken aback if it does, because I don't even think that it has grounding. That's what I'm hearing from it. And I may be misinterpreting this. But the fact that he said, I was actually surprised myself in a certain way, leads me to believe, right? Like there's those question marks around it. And then I think about, go ahead. Yeah.
Oh, I was just going to say, that reminds me of, I just finished reading On Tyranny, and there's like 20 lessons on authoritarianism. Yep, that's it.
On my desk. Yes.
Lesson number 1, don't comply I think it's, what is it? Don't comply, right? Or don't comply in advance or something like that.
It is, do not obey in advance.
Do not obey in advance.
Anticipatory compliance, yes.
And that's exactly, Crystal, like you're saying, even Trump is shocked that lesson number 1, no one's really listening.
Yes. Well, and then my first thought was Harvard and like all of everything that has been happening and the pushback that initially we were celebrating, right? Like, yay, Harvard. I heard it on the podcast too. I was celebrating. But then, just within the last couple of days, Harvard comes out and renames their diversity office. They come out and say they're not going to be funding their affinity group graduation celebrations here forward. And I'm like,
come on,
stop it. Why you got a Harvard?
Yes. So those are things on my mind. I'm thinking about the strategic ways that we're seeing people, institutions chipped off. But I mean, even if we think about Trump's intentions, of what he thinks will even stick or fly, like, I just think we're giving him so much more power than we need to. And that's the troubling part.
What is that?
I don't know.
Oh my gosh. Calling John Dugan on the leadership stuff here. I'm like, what is this?
Yes.
Like, where is the leadership? That's what I've been
the
kind
model,
of unpacking.
right?
Yeah. What is the model? And thanks for kicking us off, Crystal.
Yeah. Respond, go on. I don't need to
Sure. That just like sums up so much of these 100 days. I was just listening to Tressie McMillan Cottom yesterday or this morning. I can't remember when, but New York Times and NPR had like these luminaries kind of discussing the first 100 days. And she said something like, the thing that has surprised her most is that anyone was surprised.
Yeah.
Right. So I feel like I agree with her. The shock and awe was like mapped out, publicized. Hey, this is what we're going to do. And then remember during the campaign and an election, when people asked him, oh, are you following this Project 2025 thing? He's like, I don't even know what this is. And to a T, everything is there. Did people actually believe him when he said, like, I don't even know what this is? I mean, come on, right? And maybe we were frozen by like, yes, we believe this is going to happen, but we don't even know how to fight this. But I'm so dismayed to see so many of these leaders just kind of capitulating, and then there's like such a low bar for anyone just to even just say, and if not do something, saying things, right? Like these speeches that we're seeing on the Dem side around the country, and people are just getting celebrated for them saying things, right? Like, which
having
is
a
okay,
town hall. Yeah.
Great. Let's say the things. This is fascism. This is tyranny. We need to fight it. But okay, can you lead? Like, who are we all? Like, how are we all leading the fight tangibly? And maybe it is on the quieter end of things, and that's fine. But I kind of I feel like my morale could use a little lift. you know?
Yeah.
And so I think that's why I keep coming. I'm surprising myself in terms of like, am I an optimist? Because I keep trying to find these little victories. Like the NAACP Legal Defense Fund just won an injunction against the Dear Colleague letter, right? And or this call from the administration to to document and certify diversity, equity, and inclusion activities state by state in higher education and K-12. And then the LDF won an injunction against that, right? And so these things aren't getting lifted up, but even if they were, and maybe it's like if we did lift it up, would our institutional leaders, like at Nebraska, Crystal, you spoke at the board of trustees, right? Like, would they even pay attention to this?
Yes.
I don't know. What were the vibes at the board, Crystal?
I'm super interested in this. Yeah.
So that meeting was very long, 3.5 hours, in fact, unexpectedly, not because there was so much discussion about bylaws changes, which was the whole reason why I was there, right? They back in, oh my gosh, I don't even know, maybe in February at this point, they called an emergency meeting in response to the Dear Colleague letter and the executive order, and put up some bylaws to be amended in response to the letter. And then this was the closest or the next meeting, and so they were supposed to discuss it further, I suppose, or vote on it, and or both. There was a lot of celebrations, a lot of other things happening. So we waited maybe 2.5 hours for the actual discussion to start. And when it did, I mean, I was a little bit disheartened in some ways. They switch the board meetings between campuses. We're a system. So our main campus is in Lincoln. That's where the emergency meeting was. And at that meeting, I think we maybe had 5 or 6 faculty members that spoke out against the bylaws changes. This meeting was at Omaha. And there were 2 of us faculty that spoke. And there were also, I believe, 2 or 3 students that spoke as well, which was great. Prior to the meeting, we collected testimonies, written testimonies. We had another group that collected postcards and had folks, write statements on postcards and submit those digitally to the regents ahead of time of the meeting, and then also bring them there. We had a couple hundred statements that we presented to them. And I thought there would be more discussion. I thought that there would be a little bit more debate, but what I was really heartened to see is that we had one board member who had a wonderfully prepared statement about why they were not going to vote to pass the bylaws changes.
And the bylaws changes explanatory pause was to kind of essentially ban diversity, equity, inclusion, right?
Not so much. So basically to remove references to like race, to gender, and then it was really in reference to like student admissions policies, financial aid, I believe, and then also what's the word that I'm looking for? Employment. So So we had, again, one regent who had a wonderful statement and shared, they didn't feel that it was actually in the best interest of our community. And, we can't even be sure, right, that we aren't going to still have some sort of punishment by, complying, and that's not necessarily going to save us. So we had one regent that was amazing, spoke out. Then we also had all of our students who did not vote to pass it. One student abstained on the first one. They were a little uncertain about affirmative action in admissions or in hiring in general. And so I think that they just didn't feel comfortable with having an opinion on it. But the others, all 3, also spoke and said that it wasn't in the best interest of students. And so even though the meeting didn't go, they still passed the bylaws changes.
Yeah.
Even though it didn't turn the tides necessarily that we were there. I felt that it was amazing to see these students stand up for, their peers, their current peers and future peers, and the institution more generally, because it's not just about students, it's about hiring practices, for the institution broadly, and a legacy of what we define as discrimination. We can't even say the words of what discrimination means.
Due to the bylaw changes.
Yeah, like
That's
we don't accept
ridiculous.
discrimination, but we can't say discrimination on the basis of race, of gender. Like, how does that even make sense? So,
wow.
Yeah. So, alas,
alas, and I was just, I think it's so important to be on the record.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. To create the record for the future. Because I think that is I think we think about like all those Supreme Court cases that don't go the way of equity and advancement of a multiracial democracy, but there's always the dissents, right? And reading those dissents, that's the record and basis for future action. And so thank you, Crystal, for, being part of, and your community for being there.
Yeah. Well, thank you for that. It did feel right. I mean, again, whenever we think about where we want to show up and what's important to us and what we know is true, and, from our research and the work that we do, it's hard not to speak out whenever we see harm that's happening within our communities. So, there was that. I felt good about what I said, though. I will say that, because I kind of was like as much as I could to the people that employ me, I mean,
right.
It could have gone a lot further, but I did work there.
No, it's really powerful. And I mentioned as we were prepping to start today that I just watched your clip because it was posted on Instagram, I think. And as I was watching it, I was like, see, this is a microcosm of what could be happening at board meetings all over higher education right now, right? We have these opportunities to speak. We need to use them. We need to be, present. And as you said, let's do that direct dissent, right? So, oh.
Those of you not on video, my child has joined the video. Sorry. This is what it's about, right? These kiddos.
Exactly.
The future. And
exactly. Yes. I'm picking up my daughter from college tomorrow, and I can't wait to see her and spend time and just debrief and all of that. So yeah, the college students are the future, right? And it's hard to kind of regain that sense of calm and clarity when there's so much noise, happening in the world right now.
I also want to raise, I was going to raise, today is May Day. And I know here in Chicago, I think other cities too. I know in Chicago, we had thousands of people turn out today. It was raining, it was pouring, people were still out. And so, speaking of being on the record, right? There's so many different ways to be on the record. It was really great to see so many people out there, making their voices heard and dissent.
Yeah. This organization, and I think it's across, it's the organization's called 50-51, right? It's like 50 states, 50 protests, one movement. I think that's what it stands for. I'll have to look that up, and we'll post the link. But they're posting updated opportunities to show up and be visible. And I think that's, one more tool that we can use and engage. That's good. May Day.
May Day. We are labor in student affairs. We are workers. We're a helping profession, but we are working within these large institutions. And
I think one of the things that, before we go on to like kind of what we can do within our spheres of influence, I'm really curious about how you all see who is wielding power, where have the power dynamics, shifted, who is like coalescing power, together, and just in general, like, is the broader public paying attention? Because that's the other question I have, and how might we regain some of that power?
Where are we organizing power? I mean, I've just been, as you know, I'm no longer directly on a college campus, but I am noticing, the quiet ways that different spaces and corners of our communities are gathering together and figuring out what will we do, how will we show up, the different ways. I also want to note last week, apparently Northwestern University's Faculty Senate had a quorum for the first time in its history. Right. So there are things happening, and I do have a lot of friends on faculty at Northwestern, and I know for months they've been meeting at each other's homes and, at coffee shops and figuring out what we study, right? Higher education governance. And for the first time in the history of this not very young university, the faculty finally got it together and got a quorum. And they passed 4 resolutions, explicitly talking about academic freedom and rights to speech and expression, in addition to, calling for divestment from genocide in Palestine, right? So they were pretty radical resolutions, all told. And look at that. Look at that.
Yeah. Wow.
So at 100 days into this new term, I feel like we are just about, I still feel like we're on a precipice of like, it's still building, but I'm starting to feel a little bit of hope, even when we do have these setbacks, like Harvard being like, we're leading the way, just kidding. Or, so we have to hold on to these like community people wins.
Yeah. Yeah. And as I was chatting with Keith again this morning, we were just talking about like, where are people at right now? I mean, it is exhausting. It is exhausting keeping up with the news. And as he and I were like kind of strategizing, like what kind of conversation would be beneficial at this moment as we're kind of wrapping up the series, it was like, I think we need a, what's next, and then how can we start figuring out what those coalitions are, whether it's, shared across campuses or within our own campuses. And so the coalition building, I think, and the hope for the future, I think those are two things that, I don't know, in one of the pieces that we'll post in the show notes, the former Undersecretary of Education, James Cavall, who happened to visit Michigan State University last fall and met with a bunch of students, who was delightful. He said, was kind of taking stock of the first 100 days. And then he's like, and we have 1,361 days to go. So buckle.
We sure
buckle
do.
Up. Yep.
We sure do.
Yeah. Crystal, what about you? Where are you in the in the hopefulness?
I always have hope. Like I do feel like I'm pretty optimistic usually. If you catch me on a day whenever I'm not, that's more unusual. But OiYan and I think in previous podcasts, I forgot if it was last week or the week before, you all talked about like the Big Ten coalition compact. So like our faculty senate passed a resolution to support it. And we also had our student government propose a resolution to support our resolution. And so I think that is something we haven't really talked about yet, is thinking, and we're right now kind of questioning what staff sent it up to, like maybe we can talk with them and then think about our other campuses. So I'm trying to think strategically of how we continue to apply pressure to our institutional leaders, because they are feeling the pressure, right? Like, I think it was last week that there was this discussion, right, of conflicting values within the institution that are at play. You know, I think it was Brennan who brought up an example of a colleague who said, like, yeah, we have to cut DEI because, like, I want my research to keep going. And, like, can we just, you know, stop DEI stuff because this is important too. But I argue we can't stand to lose any of it. It's all important. And if we start chipping away at who we are, then, like, who are we?
Right.
And I think that, and I'm going to get back to, like, the coalition building, but really quickly, something that I've been thinking on is the ways that the, you know, terms diversity, equity, and inclusion are used have been weaponized, and we know that. But I think they've gotten so watered down now that we even forget what that is. It feels like extras, like, you know, it's just these cutesy things that we do to help students have fun and have a good campus, you know, experience. DEI is civil rights. Like, and I think if we stop saying this DEI work, we need to say, no, this is anti-civil rights progress. That's a whole different meaning. I very seriously doubt that that colleague who was saying, can't we just scrap the DEI, which is important, would find it harder to say, can't we just scrap civil rights? And then, you know, it's just even the words, right? So I think it's really important for us to, like, hone in on that. And anytime that we keep hearing people dismiss diversity, equity, and inclusion as something that's, you know, non-vital to our campus communities, just to have that reminder of, like, no, this is human rights, civil rights work that we're doing within campus spaces and beyond. But in terms of coalition building, I think that tuning into each of the pockets of power that we have that are already groups that exist, because we know one person doing something is not going to be as effective as if we have an entire group and then multiple groups. And then what happens whenever all of these groups are working together? Earlier, I was talking about how students in my class kind of were like, oh, wow, this stuff is happening. Again, those are higher ed grad students who weren't fully informed about what's happening. Whenever we actually met with student government senators earlier this week who said, you know, we want to talk to you more about the resolution, et cetera. And when we talked to them and they asked us, like, why are you concerned about this? Like, can you tell us more about why this resolution was put forward? And we started talking about, you know, all the things that we're worried about. They were like, wow, we've learned so much in just this short half-hour meeting. And that leads me to believe that it's not that people don't care. It's not that people aren't engaged because they don't think that it matters, but they don't really have an understanding of how all of these things are interconnected and how they work. A student doesn't know
interconnection.
Like, why tenure attacks matter. Like, yeah, I want my faculty to have that. Sure, maybe, I don't know, but why does it affect me? Or how does it affect what we can or can't teach? Like, what's NIH and what's a 15% indirect, and, like, what does that matter? And all these universities have millions of dollars, and, like, I don't know, they're going to lose some money. I don't know what that means. Like, we have to be more intentional about educating folks and activating them. I don't think that we can continue to expect that people are keeping up with these things and understand the interconnection.
And giving the on-ramps on how to activate, right? And also, right, really honing in on the interconnectedness, because I have heard for decades people are like, oh, it's higher ed, that's a privileged space, right? I have other concerns, and not really understanding how interconnected all of it is, right? And we've talked about in this limited series about how connected it is, how the universities serve as major employers, as you know, advancing science for cancer cures and health advances, and all these various benefits that connect to everything in our lives. Right. And so then I think it is that on-ramping to getting people, helping people. You're right, Crystal. Absolutely.
So then you see, you know, I think we talked about it as like a marketing and communications kind of problem, right? If like, we need to think about the messaging. Where is the messaging? Who is picking up these stories about the value and how institutions of higher education are contributing to democracy, right? And there's there's some interesting podcasts, other podcasts that unpack this. The other piece that I was thinking about, because, first of all, those of you who are experts in higher education and have PhDs in this area, like this, I think, as Dr. Commodore said, like, this is our time to shine, right? This is our moment to start unpacking and showing the ways in which our institutions, if one side, the folks who are receiving NIH funding are, upset at the folks who are doing the DEI work, like, we are all part of the same campus. We are all one university. Like, what takes down, one unit will ultimately affect everyone. But this book on tyranny, I think, has been a super fascinating read. And if you haven't picked it up, definitely, think a little bit about what are the current moment and what is it saying about what's happening right now? Because it wasn't written within that, context necessarily. But
everyone needs to read it. Everyone needs to read this. Like,
yes.
absolutely. This is your summer reading.
It's so super short. Yep. And it is like, this is the, like, I think, moment that we're at. So, but I also wonder, what forms of grassroots or institutional or government coalition building is maybe going to be most effective, or is it just, we just need to do all of it? Like, we all have limited time, where should I put my efforts and how should I engage?
I think it's an assessment of like what your own capacity and skill sets are. Right. I think I've given a shout out to Deepa Iyer's book before. What is it? I always forget the title. Social Change Now, a Guide for Reflection and Connection. And she offers different roles that people play in movements and leadership for change, collective efforts for change. And so there's different people play the role of storytellers, but then there are also weavers, there's, frontline folks and these different roles that we each play. So I think it begins with a self-reflection as your own individual, but then also your various team settings, whether it's your department or other social networks, like, what is your role? What is everyone's different roles and capacities and skill sets? Right. And then how do you bring it all together? Right. So I think it starts there. So then, for example, with the messaging that we were talking about, who are the messengers, right? I am, if anyone is following me on social media, I am fully obsessed with Sinners right now. And I'm going to see it again tomorrow. And, I was thinking, Ryan Coogler has done one of the best ethnic studies efforts, race and ethnic studies efforts out there. Right? He is a storyteller, right? I don't know how to make a movie. I don't know how to make these things, right? I don't even know how to make a TikTok video, okay? So like, we have storytellers in our midst, in our communities. And, I had this thought, the amount of racial history that Ryan Coogler does in Sinners in 1930s, from 1930s Mississippi, Delta, Jim Crow South, right? I was like, would this be banned in different places that have ordinances against learning about our accurate, truthful histories, right? But I have not heard of that talk, right? Instead, I've heard, wow, look at this blockbuster hit that's making money for Hollywood, right? This is the first time since the pandemic that people are actually really going out to the movies. That's the conversation, right? Meanwhile, they're like watching it. People are watching it like 2-3 times me, right? and others.
Have you seen it, Crystal?
No,
no, I haven't seen it either. So I'm like,
oh my God, you have to see it, right? And Yeah. So anyone who is out there listening, you've seen it, you know what I'm talking about. Like these histories that people are
Mhm.
looking up further, like, oh, I didn't know there were Chinese people in 1930s Mississippi
Yeah.
Delta, right? So then people are
Yeah.
looking that up and like curious. And oh, I didn't know the Choctaw were the Native Americans in that region. And people are looking that up and learning more, right? And so these are all, so I think the coalitions also have to come to creative cultural producers too. How do we
Mm,
connect with
mm.
right people who actually know how to tell stories beyond student affairs now? Love you, Heather, love the team, right? But we have a very specific
Yes,
audience,
we
right?
do. Yeah. Yeah.
So and we're very clear about that. You're very clear about that, and that's why it's successful, right? There are others who have farther reach.
Yes. Yes. And I think so my next question is really about like what role do we in student affairs, right? For folks who are listening, what role do we play in this next, whether it's next 100 days, whether it's next 1300 days as we do the countdown, but like I I feel like we have an important role. Maybe it's telling the stories, maybe it's supporting students in these moments, checking in with students. Are they doing okay? As students are vacating our campuses for the summer months, like that's also feels a little bit dispersed. So I don't know what either of you would say about what role should student affairs folks who are listening play in the next 100 days?
Yeah, I think that again, I resonate a lot with what OiYan shared in terms of like thinking about your strengths,
Mm,
where you want to contribute. There's so much to do,
mm-hmm,
right? Like
mm-hmm.
from engaging in protests, sure, whether that's in on campus or out of campus or outside of campus, or whether that is um, you know, messaging your reps, like your state
Mm-hmm.
reps, whether that's, going to your board of regents meetings and speaking out, whether that is supporting students and having that conversation day to day of like how they're feeling or supporting them like on an individual level. All of those things are really important. For me, I'm thinking about this like activation piece a lot. And
Mm-hmm.
I was literally cycling inside, like a gym, whatever. So not dangerously cycling, but on my phone, like in my notes, like writing down ideas that I was having around like, oh, like creating, a flyer that says something to the extent of like higher ed or, colleges and universities everywhere are under attack. How is that affecting you? And what can you do about it? And then
Yeah.
having a QR code that links to information and just putting those all over campus and like
Yeah.
just letting people see that, right? Or
Yep.
sharing it literally with every other campus across the country, right? Like, how are we informing folks and keeping them updated? But then to OiYan's point of like, how do we on ramp them? I like that you use that term of like giving them opportunities and strategies. And, even as student affairs professionals, how are we talking to students about like their rights to protest? I think that it's important for us
Mm,
to know what
mm,
our campus guidelines are and how we're talking to students about safely doing so and understanding their rights and understanding what that looks like more broadly speaking. Not to say, hey, I want you all to go protest. Here's a list of how to do it. Maybe some of us can do that, but to think strategically of how we just support students in whatever it is that they want to do, how they want to show up
mm-hmm,
too. And
mm-hmm,
I also really loved um, Dr. Charles Davis posted
mm.
a picture, series of pictures. I don't even know what was happening. I was just like, this is beautiful. I love it. It was We Are DEI March at the University of
Yes. At the
Michigan.
University of Michigan.
And
Yes.
all of these people had shirts that said like hashtag We Are DEI. And I don't know what else was on the shirt or what was happening at this event, but it was just everyone was
Beautiful.
together. Everyone had these shirts. Everyone was holding these signs, like talking. And I think,
Mm-hmm.
what if we did that on every single campus? Like, what if
Yeah.
every campus had
Yeah.
hashtag We Are DEI? Like,
I think
Yeah.
Colorado State did that when their president announced kind of like, oh, we're going to be rolling back all the diversity programs, et cetera. And man, People
I'm a
freak
2-time
out.
CSU grad, so I'm like,
Yes, yes, yes. So you understand the pain because there's
Yeah.
such a deep legacy there of
Yeah.
this work.
All the advocacy offices and everything.
All the advocacy. So, students also had the We Are DEI signs. I don't know if there were t-shirts, but this is, this is a thing. You're right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And we don't have to, like, that's the thing. It's like, we can share ideas and we can all do it together.
Yes.
We're
it's
all
not
in
trademarked. We are all
We're
in
not
this together.
trademarked.
Yes, like let's stop being in our silos of our individual institutions. Like these student governments, go talk to another student government of the Big Ten. Have y'all talked to each other? Have
Yes, and there is
talk to each other.
There is I was really excited to see the U.S. Student Association seems to be re-energizing now. They had a conference recently, so grad school, I was in the UC system. There's the UC Student Association, and they networked with the USSA, right? So this is a network of student governments. I remember Wisconsin was in it. A lot of Big Ten schools were part of USSA. So
that's cool. That's really cool.
We can just build on what's already there.
I know.
Literally, we have
so many good ideas. Crystal, if you send me a flyer with a QR code, I will make sure it's printed and put all over my campus. So I love that. I do think those are some of the things that we can do. I shout out to my parents, because I will say, the folks who have the time and the energy are folks who are retired. Like they are who I have seen at protests, partially because my parents, were activists in the 60s. And so now they're like, we're still here doing this protesting work. So that's what I had the opportunity to do with them a couple of weeks ago. It was a lot of fun. I know we could keep going, and there's so many things that we can discuss, but I think we should move to kind of final thoughts as we're wrapping up. So we kind of always end with this last, what's on the horizon, what's keeping you up at night, and what's bringing you joy. So does somebody want to volunteer to go first?
Oh my gosh. Let's see. I already mentioned Sinners. That was like my one goal for this episode, was to
promote the movie.
Bring in my obsession. But so that's definitely bringing me joy. But also just like these little sparks, like I said, wow, faculty senates are finally making quorum after hundreds of years. That's wow, that's a moment of hope right there. Joy, yes, summer weather is coming eventually to the Midwest someday. But we've had glimpses. That's been really nice. I think it's in this conversation, I keep forgetting, and I want to make sure that I bring this up, which is we have to take moments of rest.
Yes.
So as we transition into summer, celebrate these accomplishments. I know, Heather, you were just coming from a graduation ceremony. There's so much joy in those moments. This is like the one thing I definitely for sure miss deeply is commencement time and putting on the regalia and meeting people's families and just celebrating these major milestones, and just reveling in that and taking stock of that. And then I think summer is a really good time to just do some deep, guided reflection, right? And so to this point, that's what's on my mind is as we enter summer, sometimes we just totally lose steam, right? And we lose connectivity. And I'm worried. I am worried, and I want people to rest. And at the same time, I'm wondering how we maintain these connections that we've made in these first 100 days and that we don't lose that momentum.
Yeah, for sure. Crystal, is that your dog?
The puppies are bringing you joy, Crystal.
I have the tiniest dog is the loudest dog. This is the golden rule of pet ownership. I feel like our large dog never barks.
I love that this is the kid and dog episode.
Yeah. I love
Sorry, y'all. I know that's annoying, but for me, I am thinking about. I get excited about pushing forward. I get excited about pushing back. I get excited about collective action. And, you know, I've been so caught up in things that have been happening within our campus for the past few weeks that I got a little bit behind on work that I do with another collective now dubbed the Higher Education Advocacy Collective. It was just like a working group for a couple of years, but now, you know, we have a little name and try to develop resources and you know, think of ways to support folks as best as, you know, we can with the time that we have as well, with whoever is able to show up. And so I'm excited about things like that. I know there's another faculty member on our campus who just recently reached out to a lot of folks to connect them to an advocacy movement, joining students, staff, and faculty that care about diversity, equity, and inclusion, civil rights progress within our college campus. And it's also kind of cool to, you know, like have somebody else doing it and then just be like, yeah, I'll go, I'll show up, and not, you know, do the coordinating part. So I'm excited to be a part of that. But things like that keep me energized. I definitely think that we deserve rest during summer. I am 1000% claiming that. But I also don't want to completely go to sleep during the summer because I'm afraid of what we're going to return back to. Last summer, we returned back at UNL to our Office of Diversity and Inclusion being eliminated the week before classes started. And so, you know, I would also say that I hope that's not the case, that we come back to more massive and dramatic changes in response to all of this, but we'll see what that looks like. And so for folks just to be ready and prepared, you know, to push back and to collect together and, you know, advocate in all the ways that you can. I think that that part's important. So for the joy part, I am so excited because shout out to my friends and colleagues, doctors Antonio Duran and Michael Goodman. We're doing a little writing retreat in May to Santa Fe, and I've never been there. And so I'm excited to just spend time with people and, you know, OiYan, to your point of like reflection and like taking a minute to pause. This semester has been so go. And I keep apologizing to all of my students. Like, I'm behind in grading. Like, it's happening. I promise you're doing great. Like, I'm gonna get to it. And it's just always, this whole semester has just been felt like, you know, a race of like trying to catch up with something and then something else comes up. And so I'm really looking forward to that pause and taking time with loved ones, friends, and to get to just think and dream about what I want to do, you know, forward. So yeah.
Let's dream.
I love it. I love it. Yeah. Part of the reason why we're pausing this series is because faculty often off in the summer. I am also a week from tomorrow leading an undergrad study abroad in Europe. So I will be gone for a month. And so we always kind of knew there was going to be an end date. That it doesn't mean that this is going to be 100% over, and maybe we'll reconstitute the group in the fall, or if there's some major thing that happens over the course of the summer. I am so grateful, though, to both the two of you, as well as all of the other correspondents. So I'm going to name all of you. So Dr. Crystal Garcia, Dr. OiYan Poon, Dr. Brendan Cantwell, Dr. Felicia Commodore, and Dr. Dimitri Morgan. When I reached out to all five of you with just like the hope that maybe one or two would be interested in joining me, and everybody said yes, I had no idea. And this has definitely exceeded all of my dreams. So thank you so much for being a part of these conversations. And
well, Heather,
you know,
wait, hang on.
Yes.
Also, like, I don't think you ever get thanked, you know? So like, maybe we should also, you're so amazing with helping put things together and stay in contact with us and
staying on top of everything.
Yeah.
And I know, shout out to Keith too. I know he's behind the scenes there.
Yeah. I mean, the whole Student Affairs Now team has kind of become wrapped up in this. Like, we have our Thursday prep meetings generally, and we're like talking about all regular episodes, but then we end up spending half of the time talking about what's in the news.
Oh, wow.
So it's been, I will say, I think, you know, as I look to the future, I think staying informed with a purpose, right? Because it's easy to get into the doom scrolling, you know, moment of like everything. I look at the New York Times and I'm like, oh my gosh, like like, how do I open the New York Times every day and just go like, oh, I just want to close it again. But if I know there's a purpose, and I can do something with that information, I think that's super helpful. That's the context, right? That's the gaining that context, to be able to be informed. If you are listening today and you haven't joined us, or watched or listened to any of the past episodes, you can do that at studentaffairsnow.com/current-campus-context. As I just said, a huge thanks to the whole Student Affairs Now team for shaping and supporting this limited series from the beginning. We are evolving as a field quickly. And I think as we consider what's next as both a field of student affairs broadly in higher education, the more we can have generative conversations, the more we can come together. So if you have feedback or ideas of what you'd like to hear next, from us, please let us know. So Crystal, OiYan, thanks again. And thanks to the other correspondents. And all of you who are listening and watching, thanks for tuning in to Current Campus Context, brought to you by Student Affairs Now. We will see you next time, whatever comes next.